This is Hacker Public Radio episode 3509 for Thursday the 13th of January 2022. Today's show is entitled Linux Inlaws S01E46, the Matrix project without Neo. And is part of the series Linux Inlaws. It is hosted by Monochrome and is about 72 minutes long and carries an explicit flag. The summary is the Matrix project without Neo.
This is Linux Inlaws, a podcast on topics around free and open source software, any associated contraband, communism, the revolution in general, and whatever fancies you tickle. Please note that this and other episodes may contain strong language, offensive humor, and other certainly not politically correct language. You have been warned. Our parents insisted on this disclaimer. Happy Mom? Thus, the content is not suitable for consumption in the workplace, especially when played back in an open plan office or similar environments. Any minors under the age of 35 or any pets including fluffy little killer bunnies, your trusty guide dog, unless on speed, and cute T-Rexes or other associated dinosaurs. This is Linux Inlaws, Season 1, Episode 47. Martin, how are things?
Oh, things are fine and dandy. We have a special guest tonight.
Indeed, but before we go into this, basically, Martin, why don't we bitch a little bit about the weather and Brexit as we usually do?
Well, why don't we bitch a little bit about what's happening in Germany for a change?
We can. Just go for it.
How's it going in Germany?
What's happening in Germany? Tell me. You see, Martin, I don't get out much, so I wouldn't know.
Don't you live there? Or is that
yes, but this is only transitory.
Leave your apartment anymore?
Indeed, it's called COVID. You may know yourself, Martin. I don't know.
No, we're all good over here. Yeah, all sorted.
Okay, Brexit or not? Excellent.
Yep.
Okay, and without further ado, now that the bitching part is over or has been dealt with, I'm more than happy to introduce Neil Johnson.
Hello.
Good evening. But Martin, why don't I really shut up now and you take it from here?
Well, I think we'll need to let Neil introduce himself, really.
Hello. I'm Neil. I'm here representing the matrix.org project, which is an open network for secure, decentralized communication. And really what we're trying to do is create this open standard for instant messaging. We have a broader vision, but right now that's really where we're at. And the whole sort of I guess the key into this is if you think about maybe the apps that you have on your phone today, and you have 5-6 different messaging apps, and they're all walled gardens and they can't interoperate, and so you have to remember who you talk to with you speak to this person with Signal and this person on I don't know, SMS even, or Telegram or whatever it will be, and it's a bit of a bummer maybe to have to remember all of that, but there's something really important underneath all of this, which is if you're using WhatsApp and you decide that you don't like some of the changes to terms of service of that service, you can't really leave, or you can, but if you do, you leave your social graph behind. And that's not a great situation to be in. And we think at Matrix it'd be much better if it was a bit like email, where it's an open standard. So if you don't like your provider, you can just move. And in fact, if you own your own domain, you can just move completely transparently and no one even knows. But whatever the case, you can still carry on sending email, and you can move from Gmail to Hotmail to self-hosted, or whatever you want to do. And with Matrix, we kind of want to take the same kind of approach, but applying it to instant messaging and taking a kind of more more modern approach to this, because email's obviously 50 years old, and fantastic technology had a huge impact in the world. But what we're trying to do at Matrix is have the same sort of impact, but maybe for the next 50 years. And so what that means today is we have this open standard. We have lots and lots of different implementations of the server technology and clients. Everything is end-to-end encrypted. There's no single point of control. It's entirely decentralized. And there's an open federation. Anyone can spin up their own Matrix server. No one can stop you. All the code is Apache 2 licensed, so you can just run wild with this. And that's really what we've been doing. In terms of actual people using this technology, it's quite a wide range. It's at one end, particularly in the sort of open source communities world, Mozilla use Matrix now for all of their community projects. We have GNOME and KDE and Wikimedia also using Matrix, and we have W3C just very recently trialing. So fingers crossed on that. Right the way through to the other end of the spectrum, where really large governmental organizations and governments are adopting this technology as well. And what's kind of interesting about that is having this kind of decentralized architecture is actually a really, really good fit for very, very big organizations that have a lot of structures and a lot of silos. They need to talk to themselves, but they don't necessarily want to share kit between themselves. So this is this project. How's that for an intro?
Perfect. That was beautiful. Thank you for listening, people. We'll see you. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, we're done.
No need. Before we go into the nitty-gritty details of the project, maybe we can talk a little bit about yourself.
Oh, sure.
Looking at your LinkedIn page, I see that you're hailing from Cambridge. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Neil Johnson, where he comes from, and what actually took him to the project?
Okay, sure. So, I mean, my background is as an engineer, and it was always, as I think a lot of people in that discipline, you're just always fascinated with taking things apart and hopefully putting them back together again in a way that they largely work how they sort of used to. And so that was where my studies took me, and I was spending a lot of time around probably more about signal processing than anything else. That was kind of my passion. But I ended up working in a communications company. This was sort of about 20 years ago now, and it was this cool technology called SMS, and it was a sort of not quite early days of SMS, but definitely early enough where you could still build some quite interesting businesses around it. And the reason I mentioned that company was I met a whole bunch of people who I would later work with on the Matrix project. So we were always talking about communications, and we were always talking about open standards. And one particular part of the company that I wasn't so involved with, they were building a lot of communication apps for various different telecommunication companies. And the problem was they were building out an app for this one and for this one and for this one, and they just thought it was awful that they weren't actually talking to one another, because these were over-the-top services. These weren't SMS chat apps. And from all of this came this idea of why on earth is there not, is there not an open standard for communications? And so that was kind of sort of my sort of route within this. And the Matrix project, it's got a wonderful community, but in the very early days of Matrix, we formed a company now called Element, which was really just designed to hire the core team from Matrix, so we could continue to build out the protocol. Now, I was sort of off doing different things by that point and working on all sorts of other weird and wonderful technologies. But then I rejoined Element and joined the rest of the gang. And it was kind of a bit of a reunion in that sense, a lot of familiar faces, but we still had this same core passion of that, the way that people communicate is so important and so personal. And we just think we need to make this as user-centric as we possibly can. And that means choice and it means freedom. And we just didn't think anybody was really doing that, or doing that in a way that was going to really cut in and become mainstream. There were some projects on and still running that try and solve similar-ish kind of problems. So that's a little bit of sort of how I came to get involved in this sort of stuff. It's also a super cool problem from a technical perspective. You know, how do you build any of these services in a decentralized way where there's no central point of control and order? There's some fascinating stuff there. So I'm a member of the Matrix core team, but I also work for Element, this company that was originally there to hire the Matrix core team. Our community has grown massively, and now we have plenty of different companies contributing to it, and an even larger group of open source enthusiasts just helping us make this better and better every day. But yeah, that's my sort of day job. Is also kind of my hobby. So it's a nice mix.
Okay, that's great. I mean, we run it ourselves to communicate with our own installation, as you mentioned. It's something that is very easy to do and set up. And I just wanted to touch upon the sort of the federated element, right? It's that's something that Matrix as a foundation is very strong in the what's called the manifesto, that it's not a centralized communication system. However, in our instance, I'm running a completely isolated version of Matrix with users that I control and so on. So there is an option to do that as well, right? If you choose to do so. But it maybe for the for the users that do use the WhatsApps and the other let's say communication technologies out there, what is the real reason for going for the decentralized approach, right? Is that something that is really based on not having a control? Is it kind of are we thinking about a communist principle here? Would you like to sort of add to that a little bit?
I mean, I'd say that there's a very strong political undercurrent with Matrix. I don't think that I've ever heard anyone talk about it in those sorts of terms. I think the idea of making this decentralized was really about resilience, and it being very, very difficult to keep a network sort of truly open when you have points of centralization, because someone has to control those. I mean, we even find that even with the network being decentralized as it is, where there are nodes that are significantly bigger than other nodes on the network, even that can have a kind of distorting effect. And so, for instance, the matrix.org node that we try and maintain and run, that's for the good of the community. But at the same time, like over time, we'd massively prefer it that it wasn't the biggest node on the network and it was just one of a sort of bajillion others. So it's really this sort of idea of kind of choice and freedom for how your technology serves your needs. And if somebody wants to do this in a closed federation, then that's absolutely fine. And where we want to get to at some point in the future is that the value of being part of that open federation is such that that most people would want to go that way. But there's all sorts of different use cases for this technology, and no specific reason why you have to join that federation.
Okay, interesting. I thought it was so. Your original reason was really about the having no central communications point for resilience, rather than let's say the political reasons or the option to.
I think there is. I think there is a political angle in as much as it's very hard to envisage how this sort of system could remain truly open if you had points of centralization within it. So if your goal is it to be an open standard that anybody could join, then this decentralization piece is really important to that. Because the moment you don't have that and you have reliance on a much smaller group of parties, then that group, of course, has a lot of control over how that technology might develop over time or might move over time. So I think there is a sort of political element in that regard, but I wouldn't say that the Matrix project is sort of aligned with a specific broader political movement.
Not even a little bit of communism in there. Surely disappointed. Joking. No, Neil, fair question. When I take a look at just tacking on this federation approach a little bit longer, about 2/3, I reckon, of the community events in Germany, including Chemnitzer Linux-Tage, Frostcon, and other open source community events, now have switched over to Matrix as their main means for communication before, during, and after the event. Thanks to COVID, these events have been switched to an online mode for the last 1.5 years.
Right.
The Chemnitzer Linux-Tage taking place this year probably being the best example. What I really liked about the whole thing is, and you got this spot on with the comparison to email. When you take a close look at it, email is really a federated system because you set up a mail transfer agent, and then these MTAs talk to each other based on the domain specification, similar to Matrix. But Matrix allows you to do much more things. And
right.
This is the reason why, full disclosure, we have been using a Synapse Synapse instance, which is, if I'm not completely mistaken, the reference implementation of the Matrix Foundation, of the Matrix protocol, since we ever set up this podcast about more than 1.5 years ago.
Oh, cool. Brilliant.
And this whole federation thing wasn't in the focus area when we first decided upon a communication channel between the two of us, because Martin is living in the UK, I'm living in Germany, and we use Element in addition to Synapse all the time to communicate. During the shows, after the shows, before the shows, we do our synchronization slots over Synapse and all the rest of it. So we have found this piece of technology very valuable, even in a non-federated fashion. Why don't we change tack a little bit, and why don't you speak a little bit about the technology behind Synapse and Element, if that's okay with you?
Sure, absolutely. So Synapse is a Python app. It's got the same history, I think, of pretty much any piece of software that sort of gains some sort of traction. In that, when we came up with the idea of doing this as an open standard, what we really didn't want to have happen was that it was kind of, you write the standard and then further down the line you go about trying to build some implementations. We wanted this to be implementation led, and to this day, when you want to make a proposal to augment the Matrix spec, anyone can do that, but you have to show up with a working implementation. And so that first working implementation was Synapse, and we put it out there. And all of a sudden, we sort of realized that, goodness gracious, we're in production with what was originally a proof of concept.
Globally, yes.
Yeah. And so then we had a lot of work to do, because you've got to go and you've got to go and sort of move this along. You've got to evolve the architecture so that it can be much more resilient and scalable and all these kind of good things. And you've got to do it while you're seeing lots and lots and lots of new users joining the whole time. So your landscape is changing. And also the topology of the network is changing rapidly as lots of new nodes join. So that's where we've been with Synapse. It uses Twisted for its networking. Aside from that, we're pretty sort of framework light in terms of what's there. Postgres as a data store. We've recently taken on Redis for some message passing, and I think we'll start using it more and more for caching as well. The thing that is making me chuckle about the Synapse team is they're all secretly desperate to write more Rust, and so the structure of it means I could imagine some services getting split out, and as soon as we do that, maybe the language isn't quite so important. So we might find that we want to go for a Rust implementation for some of the more performance sensitive pieces.
Oh, this is very interesting. Maybe we can shed some more light on the language choice initially, why Python, and why you are now introducing a mixture, if I understand this correctly, for Synapse of Rust and Python, because full disclosure, you're not the only project doing that.
Oh yeah, I mean Python initially because it's a great language to prototype in. I think it was as far as that. In 2014 we didn't really know that this could be successful or not, and Python seemed a pretty good language choice at that moment. So that I think was the reason. I wasn't working on the project at that time, but as far as I'm aware, that was the reason. I remember them talking about it, and it was like, oh yeah, they're just prototyping in Python. Sure, that seems like a reasonable call. I should also mention that there are multiple home server implementations. There is Dendrite, which is what we would describe as the sort of kind of a second generation server implementation. That's written in Go. And the language choice there was really that Go is there for systems programming, and it's a pretty good match for the sort of things you need to do to run a communication system. And particularly things around concurrency, it's very well set up for that. But there are also other community-derived implementations. I think probably the most promising being Conduit, which is another Rust implementation. And they all have slightly different design goals as well at this point. But for instance, the Dendrite implementation is backing a lot of the Matrix peer-to-peer demos. Actually, I shouldn't call them demos anymore. They're really starting to mature. But if you're really on board with this idea of decentralization and the protocol supports that, then there's really no reason why you can't just run the server on your phone. And we're proving that right now, and we're using Dendrite to develop that project. And of course, it has a much smaller resource usage footprint than something like Synapse, and it's easier to run it natively on various sort of devices. So there's lots of different approaches flying around. What's been interesting to watch the development of Synapse and Dendrite is that a lot of the ideas that underpin the architecture of Dendrite were in response to things we learned from Synapse. But then gradually, we've been sort of evolving Synapse towards that same kind of architectural set of patterns. So that's the sort of whistle-stop tour of the various technologies. I mean, talking about Dendrite briefly, you can run that as a monolith, or you can run that in a highly distributed manner, and that uses Kafka for message passing between the various services. And again, it's backed with Postgres as well. I don't know where you'd like me to go.
No, I wanted to pick up on something you started off with, is that you had a number of your developers wanting to pick up the Rust piece. Is that, I mean, there's obviously a number of reasons why that could be. One is they like Rust and they want to program in Rust. But from a pure technical perspective, is there a reason that some of the parts that require a more performant language, is that the reason why they want to do it?
Yeah, it's exactly that. Particularly what we would call state resolution of a particular room. That can become quite a heavy operation when you have a room that has multiple servers, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of independent servers all participating in that room, and they all need to independently arrive at the same conclusion of what's actually happening in that room. And you could imagine that problem could become quite complex once you start introducing network failures, latency, various nodes just disappearing, and so not being clear where to get your information from, and all of that combined can create quite considerable load. And of course, you can architect this in a way that that scales horizontally, but still, your straight line speed is also important, and we've definitely seen some value in that. I mean, my general sort of thought here is that if you get your architecture right, then your language choice can complement that, and you really should just focus on architecture. But at some level, Rust is there as a systems programming language. Go is there for the same sort of reasons, and they're very good. There's a very good mapping between that kind of mentality and the sorts of problems that they're designed to solve, and building out communication systems.
Interesting perspective there. Full disclosure, I had a couple of challenges with Element. That's the reason why I decided to pull down the source code and compile it myself last weekend. And that's exactly the point in time when I discovered Element as an at least, 1733, 1734 actually needs Rust as a dependency locally installed. That means, if I got this correct, you are thinking about introducing Rust to Synapse, but also are using already Rust on the client side.
Oh yeah, on the desktop app. Yeah,
yes, sorry.
That's for client side message search.
And the reason was performance?
Actually, the reason, I think, was the chap who's been building out search for us. He is the lead developer on the Matrix Rust SDK.
Okay.
So that's his language of choice, and so it was quicker and easier for him to reuse some of the work that he had done there in this context. I suspect there probably is also an argument for performance, but as far as I'm aware, the sort of inertia around the project meant that Rust was the obvious choice.
I mean, the desktop app is essentially a mixture of a JavaScript framework called Electron, if I'm not completely mistaken, and Rust and JavaScript and some other technology components, right?
Yeah.
And you're not concerned about the technical depth you're introducing with that zoo?
Well, I mean, firstly, we're trying to move.
This is, of course, a challenging question.
Yeah, no. I understand. I mean, using Electron is really a pragmatic decision. So we build it out equally for web and the desktop client, and Electron allows us to then provide a sort of native desktop client, which also then, from a packaging point of view, allows us to do things like client-side search in Rust. We don't have, and this is for specifically for encrypted rooms. If you're using the web client, this doesn't support client-side search, and instead it's all server-side search. So you only get search for unencrypted rooms, so like maybe public rooms and that sort of thing. So with our search and our cryptography infrastructure, the bounds of that are very well defined, and as a result of that, we're okay with the complexity that adds. So that's really the decision-making process around it. But I will say, going back to Synapse, one of my biggest concerns of adopting Rust and having a sort of hybrid kind of project is, of course, it adds a lot of complexity to packaging. You need developers who feel comfortable across multiple technologies. And so that definitely does add complexity, and you need to think about that very, very carefully before you really commit. So I think where we're at the moment is there's a lot of enthusiasm for it, but we haven't we haven't all sort of looked at each other and looked ourselves in the eyes and said, are we actually going to do this? That's still very much a for discussion point, because it would be a significant burden to take on. But we think that there could also be some really, really great advantages with it too.
Great. Yeah, I wanted to pick up on something else you mentioned as well, is the use of Postgres and Redis. Clearly, I run it myself on with Postgres, being a long-standing Postgres fan. But is the introduction of Redis something that you notice when you are running your own matrix.org instance? Is how many users do you have on there, and is that is using Postgres there the reason for introducing Redis, or are there other reasons for doing that?
So the reason we use Redis for message passing between processes. So because it's Python, we've got our main process. You've got your global interpreter lock. So we actually end up spinning up a bunch of other processes, and they need to talk to each other somehow. And initially, we ended up with a kind of homegrown TCP-orientated system that, was fine when we first started out, but building that kind of technology in a really, really robust, resilient way is a hard problem. And lots of people have already spent a lot of time fixing that problem, and the folks at Redis have certainly done that. So really, this was a means to help us improve the reliability and resilience of message passing within Synapse itself. That was the reason that we adopted it. So if you're running a Synapse without worker processors, then Redis doesn't really get you very much, or anything at all. But if you are running workers, Matrix doesn't scale, or Matrix servers don't scale with the number of users. It's more the complexity of the rooms that they participate in. But the moment you start joining, multiple rooms with hundreds of people in them, then you may wish to configure it with worker processors. So matrix.org is the largest node on the Open Federation, and that's the one that's really helped us understand how to scale the Synapse. It's always pushing the boundaries of what everyone else needs to do. So by the time everyone else catches up, then hopefully we've dealt with some of those problems before they get there. So I guess that's our sort of landscape, I suppose. In terms of user numbers, it varies an awful lot, and it depends a lot how you count it, because Matrix not only is its own protocol, it's also written in a way that means that it's easy to interoperate. And so we interoperate with lots of other networks, and sometimes that's really easy, like where there are other open protocols like IRC or XMPP. Sometimes it's a little bit trickier, like bridging into maybe Slack or WhatsApp or something like that. But those users are then also Matrix users on the Matrix side, and then of course sort of native for whatever protocol they're using on their side. So it's quite hard to give sort of concrete numbers. But let's say orders of magnitude. Let's say we're talking millions. When you do that, you need to separate out your processes, and we found Redis was a really great way to achieve it. That said, we're still just running it across 3 different VMs. So we're not seeing this as sort of, supercomputer kind of territory. Sorry, excuse me. But that Redis has definitely enabled us to scale that message passing piece.
Interesting, because Martin and myself, I reckon, are, or at least used to be Redis fanboys. That's the reason why we're asking, or why I'm asking, why Martin asked that question. You touched on a very interesting perspective, bridges. Mm-hmm. If I take a look at about 50% of my Telegram groups that I'm in, all of them actually have matrix bridges, which I find more than fascinating, because that tells a lot about the community's effort to make things work, even outside the federated ecosystem called Matrix?
Yeah, so bridging is really interesting because it's probably the area that is the sort of gateway for if you're forgive the pun, of how people really get into Matrix, because the possibilities, it really opens it. It's right there in front of you. You know, you can just talk to your friends on WhatsApp from your Matrix client, and you can also talk to your friends on Slack and so on and so forth. And you know, I guess the downside with bridges is you're always limited to the sort of lowest common denominator between the two protocols. But there's so much community effort, core team effort to try and make those bridges just work as well as they possibly can. That it makes this really sort of vibrant ecosystem sort of outside of the confines of Matrix, which is just really, really exciting.
More than interesting, Neil. Okay, let's take a step back. Given the success or track record of Matrix, where do you see this project going? Not just in terms of technical progress, but also painting the bigger picture here. Worldwide domination.
Well, I think that the thing that's important to realize with Matrix is that while today the primary use case is for chat, but all it really is a means to pass about arbitrary data across the internet in real time. And so you can just see it as a sort of fairly generic messaging layer for the internet. And I think that's sort of long term where we think this technology will sort of add most value. And wherever you wish to share information and that real time component is important to you, then Matrix ought to be able to support that use case. So in the sort of relatively short term, I guess this means things like, you could do forum software, you could do collaborative documents, so like a Google Docs clone. We have somebody working on that project right now at Element, just as a sort of R&D project. You could implement services like Twitter in Matrix. And there's a sort of offshoot project called Blue Sky that's sort of doing exactly that. So these are the sorts of ways that we'd love to see Matrix evolve. Obviously we think that an open standard is the right way for a instant messenger or instant messaging technology to exist and to be. And so we'd like to see that just grow and grow and grow. We'd like to see the ability to bridge into other services and to interoperate just become sort of the norm and a kind of expectation, so that anyone can talk to anyone who chooses to. And as a user, you obviously have a lot of control of your own experience. So you can choose who you talk to. But then broader than that, it's this idea of exchanging data in real time across the internet and just basically creating that layer which doesn't really exist fully today for anyone to use.
Okay, got it. Yeah, no, what sort of struck me when we first started using Matrix is that it's very much aimed at IM, right? And lots of the other platforms are, looking at audio and video and screen sharing and all kind of things. Are you, looking at some of the things you put out on your blog out there, is that something that you can see happening with Matrix, or is there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I just realized I didn't touch on that at all, did I? And also virtual reality is a sort of very interesting direction and case for us. We think this would be a good way to sort of communicate in that kind of setup. But as part of if you're using a collaboration app like Element, it's partly chat, but you care about voice, you care about video, and we feel that we've got to invest in those sorts of areas as well. Or within that app, it's got to be end-to-end encrypted because that's our bag. And so actually, earlier today, I got to use our prototype of a sort of video conference, end-to-end encrypted video conference. I mean, because you're not compositing server-side, you really can't have too many streams all at once, but we had it working pretty well with 6 or 7. And we just see this as a sort of core part of what we need to do. The background of the core team, including myself actually, was building out video telephony codecs, and so this is always an area that we kind of wanted to return to. And what we discovered, particularly over the last couple of years, is there's this enormous need not only for chat but also for voice and video, and we better make sure that the voice and video support we have in Element just works really, really well. So that's what we're doing, I guess, shortish term, and then much longer term. I mean, I was sort of joking a little bit when I was talking about virtual reality, but we think that could be really, really interesting for what we do. There's all sorts of Internet of Things applications as well. Again, this isn't really an area where we've sort of tried to directly support, but you can see that if you could make a sufficiently lightweight and low-powered matrix implementation, then that could be really, really valuable because of the interop and standards-based approach. So I think chat's our core, but if you're making a collaboration app, you have to consider voice and video as first-class citizens.
Definitely. And are you thinking of adding recording to that as well, by any chance?
Oh, goodness, yeah.
Okay.
In fact, oh God,
You've just made our day, Neil. We are really looking forward to this version. Please keep us posted.
Yeah, if it's not
really,
if it's not, I'm trying to remember if we've actually shipped it in the mainstream release or it's just our developer channels. But voice recording is here. You can use it right now. And
who do I have to kill? I'm joking.
No killing. You don't even need to kill. I'm just really annoyed at myself for not knowing the
no worries.
Release date, but it's real soon now. If it's
I mean, seriously, just send me a mail, and I'm going to include this into the show notes because this may be the grail that we've been looking for the last 1.5 years.
Hey, this would. I mean, hang on. I'm just while we're talking, I'm looking at a document called Voice Message Release Plan, dated 29th of July this year. Okay, I can tell you.
Out of the press.
The team are not going to like me giving you a date, but I'm going to very conservatively say you'll have it in September. How about that?
And this is part of Synapse then, or how does it work? Can you shed more light on the details? I'm pretty sure we are the only people interested in this. No other people will care about this.
No. Everyone's going to care about it. So hang on.
That was a joke.
All right.
Go ahead. Full disclosure. People, you heard it here first. Linux Inlaws, the place to be. Full disclosure, you get it here. The latest. Neil, go ahead. The floor is yours.
I just want to make sure we're talking about the same things. This is voice message recording. So I don't want to type. I just say, "Hey, Chris, great podcast," and then I send you that.
Yes.
So what you want?
What about recording voice calls?
Oh, right.
That's what we're getting at.
Oh, now I've got you all excited.
Sorry.
So
that's exactly what we would be looking for.
Yes, that'd be the one.
That would be the one. Yes, that would be the killer feature.
It would have saved us a lot.
Indeed.
So the reason we don't have that is because typically
for
that is for conferences, like multiple people. And the way that works in Matrix today is we basically build around a service called Jitsi. Are
you serious?
Yeah.
Oh dear. Okay.
Yes, we do. and it really serves our purpose. I mean, we obviously want to do this natively ourselves, but this is what we use, and so we use their stack and we use Ghibli to do the recordings.
Welcome to hell.
So I'm afraid we don't have.
Sorry, full disclosure. For 1.5 years, not only within the context of this podcast, also among other communities, I've tried and failed to use Ghibli to record GC sessions. Let's put it more diplomatically, with very limited success. This platform doesn't scale, I'm afraid. Even the public instances you get from the project itself that put recordings into Dropbox are not really scalable.
All right. To back up my pals at Jitsi. I mean, we ran FOSDEM off the back of this, and we did all the recordings for that conference, and all of the video support was based on Jitsi and Ghibli.
Neil, I know this because I was part of this for someone. It was all virtual.
Right.
I've yet to see the pull requests. But of the magic that they apparently did in the background to make this happen, because they couldn't have used native Jitsi and Ghibli. This is my assumption. I hope I'm wrong.
I think I don't know for certain. I don't think we made any changes. I think it was all configuration change. I think that's the case.
Again, this is magic. I'm really looking forward to the nitty-gritty technical details because, as I said, we have been trying and we failed.
Okay, I know who to put you in touch with.
Thank you.
I will very happily put you in touch
much appreciated. Okay, Martin, over to you. Enough moaning.
No, the other thing that you mentioned just briefly a moment ago was when you're thinking about doing something with VR, and to be honest, VR chat is probably one of the second highest used applications on things like Steam and what have you. Mm-hmm. So, what is the reasoning behind to add something like that? Is that the reason because you are already a decentralized platform that you want to give people the opportunity to use it in that way, or is there just purely adding more services to it?
I mean, at the moment, we're right at the sort of blue sky stage with this project. We think that this could be extremely powerful. We think that the promise of VR is there. Perhaps we don't live in the reality of that today. But the work that we're doing here, we need a mix of horizons. We need to do the things we need to do right now to grow our immediate ecosystem. We need to be looking a little bit ahead in the future. And so the sorts of projects that are more futuristic are, actually peer-to-peer is not that futuristic anymore, but we used to think of it that way. VR very much is. We've just hired someone to work in this area, and actually he's the person working on the full mesh video calling right now. And once he does that, he'll sort of move more towards the VR use case. And then the other area that I sort of touched on earlier was a sort of basically applications beyond chat generally, and could you do collaborative documents kind of things? Who knows if we can really make that work? We're kind of sort of optimistic on that. So it's not part of a sort of immediate strategy that we can just bolt on and be able to say confidently VR first class citizen. It's much more that we just think that this is a really, really interesting avenue. We think that doing this as an open standard just offers so much value. And as VR really starts to become more and more ingrained, then we want to be there, and we want to have had already a good few years under our belt of trying to solve these kind of problems, because it's going to be a challenge to get it really right. So that's basically the thinking behind this.
No, it's exciting stuff. It's still very much the domain of gamers right now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And we just, it seems like a reasonable assumption to think that it will become probably pretty broader and more mainstream over time. And yeah, we just kind of want to get ahead of that.
No, makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's certainly something that I think has taken off quite a bit, especially in the in the COVID times as well. To be fair,
right.
And so completely changing the subject a little bit. The commercialization of with Element, right? How do you see that influencing the project, if at all? And what is the objective there? Is that purely enterprise support for people who want to run it as an alternative to, say, a Slack or something like that? Is that the idea behind it?
Yeah, Element makes money in two ways. It's either through basically support and services, and the other way is through hosting. So while anybody can run their own Matrix stack, maybe they would like us to do it for them, and we'd be happy to basically provide that. And that tends to be, I don't want to say smaller, but maybe like you're a few hundred or 1,000 people, like that might be a good place to look at our hosting business. If you are a really large organization, maybe a government, and you have millions of people that you need on the service, then maybe you also have requirements around needing to host it within your own infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. Then we will help achieve that and maintain that. But the thing that's really interesting about all of this is the sort of organizations that want to work with us are choosing us because this is an open source project, and they can be very transparent. And what's more, the work that we do with them, it's not that we do something completely bespoke for them. It's much more that they will look at our roadmap and say, oh, hey, here's this really good feature, like video recording, say. You're going to do it, but you're not going to do it anytime soon. We'd like to whack
audio
it
recording, up. Audio recording, sorry.
Audio recording, sorry. Would you accelerate this work if we were to fund it? And at which point we say yes. And the thing that's really nice about that is then all of this work is available not just to that customer, but also to the community at large. And that's a really important part of how we're managing our commercial operations and deals, because we think that compounding effect is really, really important. So that's how the sort of commercial angle is sort of, that's the kind of the landscape, I suppose. And it's really for us then to sort of help these sorts of organizations figure out how to get the most out of Matrix. And of course, the more we do this with various different places, they all have similar-ish kind of needs. So because we have this compounding effect of as much as we possibly can getting into the mainstream community release, it means we then already have these capabilities for others in the future.
Interesting perspective on the way forward. Apart from the integration of blockchain technologies and quantum computing, is there anything that we should touch upon before we close off this show?
That,
of course, wasn't a joke.
Yeah, no, I got that one. What other things are important? No, look, I think we've covered off the main things. I mean, I'd say one area that is very important for us right now is that if you're building out an open network, you have to take trust and safety and abuse really, really seriously. And you've really got to build this in as a first-class citizen from as early as you possibly can. And we've all seen other communication networks or social media services that you have, I'm sure now really dedicated, great teams working in this area, but it's very hard for them to have the impact and the effect that they need to be having. And so this is an area where the Matrix project is investing heavily in and trying to build out tools, I guess, for ourselves initially, and then to share those tools so that any Matrix community can reuse them. And the ethos here is to not only provide tools for moderators of rooms and communities, but also to give tools to the user themselves. So, if you're navigating an open network, you should have the ability to say something about the experience that you're willing to have. Like maybe you're completely fine to see the whole gory internet/Matrix ecosystem, and you don't want any kind of filtering on that. Or you say, well, look, there's certain things I'm just not interested in, and I don't want to see as I use Matrix, and you should have the control yourself to do that. So we're in early stages with some of these projects. On the community tools, we're a lot further down the line, and so I'll just call it out because it's an area that any chat app, we just sort of feel like everyone should be talking about and trying to share their experience and trying to improve across the board. So it would be remiss of me not to mention it and not to make it very clear how much time we're spending on these sorts of projects.
And I reckon, needless to say, for anybody who wants to be part of this revolution, the places on GitHub will be in the show notes, as in the Synapse reference implementation, as well as Elements.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and because of the nature of it, if you look at our kit and you don't like it and you can do better, just go and write your own client and write your own server and join the party. But absolutely, there are. We've got a wonderful community, lots of chat rooms that you can join to get you going. Full-time jobs. Element are hiring. I think a few other companies in the ecosystem are hiring as well. If you like the sound of any of this, come and have a chat or reach me on Matrix. I'll share my handle and can maybe put those in the notes as well.
Yes, please. Thank you, Neil. And people, you heard it first. If you want to get rich and be part of the revolution, Element is the place to join, apparently. And with that, it takes us right into the proxies. The proxies is something called the Picks of the Week. Essentially, it's something that we all take our guests through in terms of something that has crossed your mind, Neil, that you think within the last week or two is worth mentioning. Can be anything. We rarely have government comments or political views, but rather most of the stuff evolves around books, movies, whatever, but anything goes. So if you want to share your political views, that's fine too.
Oh, goodness. Oh, you put me on the spot and my mind has gone absolutely blank.
There's an open source project called Element you might be tempted to mention. But you don't have to, Neil. That's okay.
Well, hey, I tell you what, I mean, it is sort of political, but it's relevant to Element. I think that one of the things rattling through the EU right now that I was really fascinated to hear was they're trying to figure out, we've got these enormous tech companies and we don't quite know what to do with them. And the old systems of the last century of how you deal with monopolistic practice, like they just don't seem to be working. What are we going to do about this? And there seems to be real consideration going over to the idea that if you're going to run a service like a Facebook or even a WhatsApp or an Instagram, then you need also to provide a certain level of interoperability. So suddenly this can't be a walled garden anymore. And instead, this has to be something where others can interoperate and they can build their own clients. And I was astonished to see this because it's an incredibly nuanced and a thoughtful approach to the problem. I think it's in very early stages from a legislation point of view, and I don't want to embarrass myself by misquoting the legislation, but I'm sure I can hunt it down. And I just think that's not something that's happened in the last 2 weeks, but I do think it's something I found utterly extraordinary, and I was delighted to hear it.
Details, of course, people will be in the show notes. Martin, anything on your side with regards to worth mentioning? And boxes?
Boxes? No, I don't have any boxes this week.
You don't have any boxes? Not
No,
even the great nation of the UK leaving the European Union or something like that.
That was quite some time ago, yes.
But the ripple effects are still visible. Okay, in that case, it's onto my boxes actually, and it's an author called Terry Pratchett. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. And I'm not mentioning any particular books, but there's of course the Discworld series. Details, of course, will be in the show notes. So if you are looking for something funny in a fantasy/sci-fi context with a little bit of a spin on the stories, Terry Pratchett is the author to read. There's only about 20,747 books on this world alone, so it'll be a jiffy over the weekend, no worries. Jokes aside, links will be in the show notes. And I also heavily recommend the children's book that he wrote for children, of course, of all ages. Martin, we do have feedback.
We do. We have 2 bits of feedback, in fact,
indeed.
On episode 49.
You want to read it out, and then I can add my comment?
Shall we start with the short one?
Yes.
Okay, short one. So episode 49 was about version control. Yes. Exactly. So comment posted by Trey. He says, thanks for sharing. I have been managing versions of configuration files locally on my system, and you have inspired me to use GitHub instead. We shall see how it goes. Keep up the awesome work. Thank you, Trey.
Yes, indeed. The most important remark, of course, is, and that goes in line with our numbers, is actually the last one. Keep up the awesome work. I hope he means us.
He could be meaning GitHub, I guess.
Microsoft, if you're listening, the email address is sponsor@linuxinlaws.eu.
Indeed. I think they've done a splendid job there.
David Meyer, if you're listening, I think the Christmas episode is actually, that was the one that was published before this one, is actually the one basically that tops full disclosure.
Yes.
If I'm not completely mistaken. But don't worry about it, David.
Definitely the record number full disclosure.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Right. Yes. Anything to add, Martin, before I read the next more comprehensive feedback?
No, very kind of Trey. And I mean, it was just an idea we had to talk about version control, and as it inspires people to use things like GitHub, then excellent.
Yes. Yeah, perfect. Exactly. And needless to say, you don't have to use GitHub. You can host your own GitLab instance or Gitea or something. Yep. Shameless teaser: there will be an episode forthcoming where we will go into a little bit of detail about Gitea and how to use this in a static HTML generator context. Stay tuned.
Yes, that was requested
Indeed,
by someone as well. Yeah.
Yes, Ken, if you're listening, this is your episode.
Well, Ken listens to everything, I believe.
Well, almost,
yes.
Should be. But by the way, it might make sense actually if you read out the comment from Biku, sorry, because in that case I can explain the fuck up.
Okay, sure. Right. So our favorite commentator or feedbacker, whatever the word for it is, Biku, he has spent another bit of time spend a bit of feedback, which goes as follows. Right. Again on episode 49, faulty flux capacitor or faulty version control or sacked employees is his subject. Right. Hello, Dr. Zimmerman and Martin. Do you have 2 N's in Zimmerman or not?
Don't worry about it. And Biku, we do love your feedback, but unfortunately, marketing puts a time limit on this episode, so we're going to shorten this for about 2 sentences.
It is okay.
But Biku, don't worry about it. Keep
anyway, yes, indeed, keep writing. So Biku's main feedback is that something's broken in your flux capacitor. If nothing is broken, then you need to ditch Git and replace it with something that's simpler and superior, like Darks, Fossil, or Mercurial even. Why? Because if your flux capacitor is not broken, then surely it has to be your version control system. And it is Git, as you guys mentioned in this very episode. If that too is okay, then I'm afraid Martin needs to fire those first production employees. That's not bad advice there. Yeah. It has been considered. Why? Why? Because Linux Inlaws podcast version jumped to episode number 49, straight from episode 43, skipping 5 episode numbers. Oh my
Let me
god.
interrupt you here. If you go near the post-production staff, because they are under my personal protection.
Well, maybe they
serious consequences.
Benefit from a math course, perhaps.
Sorry, but please do go on.
Spend some money on training these people.
Thank you.
Where were we? Right. So this episode on version control system was excellent, as always, informative and entertaining. Kudos. Yes, thank you, Biko. Indeed. Sorry, Chris, carry on.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, he carries on. Git's history is very colorful, full of ideals, egos, ethics, necessities, betrayals, full of great drama. In short, it involves a hero. He's willing to put ideals and ethics aside to reach his goal. His amigos aren't ready to ditch their ethics at any point. Sorry, I don't understand that bit. They almost fell apart and parted ways. The story also has a villain who is not willing to let go his control and lose possession of a secret magical formula that everyone wants but no one has. Many of our heroes' friends tried but failed to find his formula. Then comes the samba artist upon the scene, and he steals his magical formula from the villain and hands it over to our hero. Story ends, but this is only the beginning of a saga.
And so it goes on, right?
It does. He has even some suggestions for the cast, which is a little bit ambiguous, if you ask me. Yes.
Because much appreciated. As I said, unfortunately, we have to cut things out a little bit. But as I said, your lengthy feedback.
Yes.
Emails are appreciated. And because, as I said, the offer still stands. Please come on the show.
He also he does, yes. Please come on the show. And if anything, to correct Chris on his pronunciation of Git T, apparently, as it's meant to be pronounced.
Maybe I'm wrong.
In his feedback, he mentioned it is pronounced as G and T, as in T.
He says Dr. Zimmer, and he doesn't say Chris Martin. There's a difference.
Yes.
But don't worry about it.
Is this some dodgy relative of yours who does cheap operations?
I can't go into details, unfortunately. Because don't worry about these details. When we installed, and details will be in the forthcoming episode of Linux, of something called Linux Inlaws, when we installed this GTR thing, we just called it GTR. Of course, I may be totally wrong. Maybe it's Gitty. I don't know. But
all will be revealed in the Gitty or Gitty episode. Yes.
You see, the trouble, of course, with Gitty, if you replace a single consonant, you're in deep trouble. So Gitty might be the better approach to this one. And Biko, let me explain a little bit about the flux capacitor. Of course, you're spot on. The numbering actually was fucked up, and there's nothing else. There's nobody else to blame than just me. Not even the post-production stuff, no.
Oh, okay.
Because that staff is not to blame for that mistake. I take the full responsibility. Because, you see, Martin cannot fire me. That's the important bit.
I see. No,
he can't.
I wouldn't want to anyway.
Even better, Martin, even better.
That would be not very... nice.
As usual, people, if you're listening, of course, we do love you and appreciate your feedback. So the email address is feedback@linuxinlaws.eu. If you want to send us money, please get in touch with us via sponsor at linuxinlaws.eu, whether you're IBM, Microsoft, or just a sole listener. Exactly. We may be thinking about setting up a Patreon scheme to be confirmed during the course of the year. That may, in contrast to other podcasts, give you not an ad-free version, but an ad-plus version with more ads at the end of the episode. So if you want this, please get in touch via feedback@linuxinlaws.eu so we can see what we can do about this.
Yes, we can introduce some ads.
Exactly. The funny ones, if you know what I mean.
Yes, that sounds excellent plan, actually.
Yeah, exactly. You see, other podcasts basically give you an ad-free version if you put money on Patreon on this, and we might as well flip that coin around and say, no, look, if you want to have more joy and fun, simply give us money because that means more ads.
Well, we could also do it the other way around, and we can put up some annoying ads, and then if people don't want them, they can also pay some money. That might work.
Yeah, Martin, you're on this department, right? The Department of Annoying Ads.
Yeah, I'm sure we can come up with some of those.
No, I mean, sorry, I thought that was already in existence. I mean, I saw a memo with your headcount in it, and you just had 10 people. Are you insane?
10 people. Well, someone has to make the tea.
Why do you need 10 people?
Want to make the tea, want to make the coffee.
No, I mean, why do you need 10 people for annoying ads?
Want to set the desk up and set things like that.
Martin, no.
Video crew.
This is not the way it works. There's a guy called Linus Torvalds. I don't know if that
travel arrangements. It's just all complicated stuff,
No, it's not. Martin, there's a guy called Linus Torvalds.
Yes,
I don't know if that rings a bell. Exactly. So
what's he have to do with our ads?
Get in touch with him and basically saying that NVIDIA is sponsoring us. That should do the trick.
You think?
And simply record his comment. That's one annoying ad. If you know what I mean.
I think we have a few in the bag already anyway of those.
Perfect. And that, of course, concludes the feedback. And as I said, keep them coming.
Keep them coming. Yeah,
yes.
Very much appreciate it.
And with that, I would like to thank Neil Johnson to be part of this. Thank you very much, Neil, for making an appearance.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for the project as well. Yeah,
yes, and thank you for your contribution to the worldwide revolution.
We're doing our best. We're doing our best. One day at a time.
This is the Linux Inlaws.
You come for the knowledge,
but stay for the madness. Thank you for listening. This podcast is licensed under the latest version of the Creative Commons license, Tab Attribution Share Alike. Credits for the intro music go to Blue Sea Roosters for the song Salute Margot, to Twin Flames for their piece called The Flow, used for the segment intros, and finally to Celestial Ground for their song Sweet Justice, used by the Dark Side. You find these and other ditties licensed under Creative Commons at Jamendo, a website dedicated to liberate the music industry from choking copyright legislation and other crap concepts.
You've been listening to Hacker Public Radio at hackerpublicradio.org. Today's show was contributed by an HPR listener like yourself. If you ever thought of recording a podcast, then click on our contribute link to find out how easy it really is. Hosting for HPR is kindly provided by anhonesthost.com, the Internet Archive, and rsync.net. Unless otherwise stated, today's show is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 3.0 license.